Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's get started and look into our daily quiz. Let's look into the first question. Consider the following statements with respect to Chief Secretary. The office of the Chief Secretary had its origins in the central government during the British rule and was created in 1799 by Lord Wellesley. He or she is chosen by the governor from among the senior IAS officers of the state cadre. The powers and the functions of the chief secretary are mentioned in the rules of business framed by the central government. Which of the statements given above are correct? The answer to this is one only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the chief secretary. Let us try and understand what are these options. When we look into the first option is right. The office of chief secretary had its origins in the central government. So initially when this office was created, it was notified by the central government. This was during the British period and was created in 1799 by Lord Wellesley. So the first statement is right, but over a period of time, this office of the chief secretary was eventually moved to the state governments, and it was the state governments who adapted this particular position called as the chief secretary. Initially, it was introduced in the central government by the British government, but over a period of time, it became one of the important offices at the state level. If you look into the second statement, he or she is chosen by the governor from among the senior IAS officers of the state cadre. This is a wrong statement. Why is it a wrong statement? That is because he or she is chosen not by the governor, but instead it is by the chief minister. So remember, it is the chief minister who selects one of the officers in the state cadre as the chief secretary for that particular state. So the chief minister of that state also considers the merit of the candidate, the experience of the candidate, the senior officer in the state cadre, and ultimately it is the chief minister who selects the chief secretary from the state cadre. So it is not the governor, but do note it is the chief minister. When you look into the third statement, the powers and functions of the chief secretary are mentioned in the rules of business framed by the central government. This is a wrong statement. Why? Because the rules of business are framed by the state government and not the central government. So the third statement is also wrong. So who is the chief secretary? When it comes to the political affairs, what do we have? We have the chief minister who is heading the political executive. Similarly, what we also have is the administrative division. So it is the chief secretary who heads the administrative division. So the chief secretary is the executive head of the state secretariat. He is the head of the civil services in that state. He deals with all cases related to appointment, transfers and promotion, senior state level civil servants, and he also plays an important and predominant role when it comes to maintaining the morale of the state civil service. He is also the conscience keeper of that state's civil servants. And do note, when it comes to the tenure, the office of chief secretary has been excluded from the operation of the tenure system, and he has no fixed tenure for this particular post. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following statements with respect to sugarcane are correct? Sugarcane originated in New Guinea. Sugar recovery is highest when the weather is dry with low humidity, bright sunshine hours, cool nights with wide diurnal variations, and very little rainfall during the ripening period. Maharashtra is the largest cultivator of sugarcane in India. The answer to this is 1 and 2 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the sugar exports. So if we look into these statements, the first statement says sugarcane originated in New Guinea. This happens to be the right statement, and when it comes to sugarcane, this happens to be one of the widely grown crop in India, and it provides employment opportunities to millions of people either directly or indirectly, and contribute immensely to the nation development. When we look into the second statement, sugar recovery is highest when the weather is dry with low humidity, bright sunshine hours, cooler nights with wide diurnal variations, and very little rainfall during the ripening period. This happens to be the right statement. So when we speak about the reduction in the yield of the sugarcane, this generally happens because of rise in the temperature. If the climatic conditions that prevails in that region has very high temperature, or in fact very low temperature, it deteriorates the juice quality and thus affects the sugar quality. So remember, when it comes to the sugarcane production, these are some of the parameters and the variables that have to be taken care of when it comes to that region. When you look into the third statement, Maharashtra is the largest cultivator of sugarcane in India. This is a wrong statement. That is because it is not Maharashtra, but instead it is Uttar Pradesh. Now, if we look into the statistics, we have Uttar Pradesh, which is at top one, followed by Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Bihar, according to the statistics of 2020 and 21. So remember, it is Uttar Pradesh which happens to be the largest cultivator of sugarcane in India. Now let's look into the next practice question. With respect to anti-defection law, which of the following statements are correct? The presiding officer can take up a defection case suo motu. According to anti-defection law, a petition seeking disqualification has to be decided by the presiding officer within 3 months. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is none. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the anti-defection law. Let us try and understand what are these options. When we look into the first statement, it says the presiding officer can take up a defection case suo motu. This is a wrong statement. What do we mean by it? Let's assume for a moment there is one of the persons. This person was an MLA or a member of parliament from a party A. So this person has now defected from party A to party B. This is when anti-defection law comes into picture. So if a person moves from one party to another party, that is when anti-defection law comes into force. What exactly happens? During this period, there might be a member of the Legislative Assembly or a member of the Parliament. These people or any of the members in the Assembly or in the Parliament will have to notify the same to the presiding officer. So only when notified to the presiding officer, then the presiding officer will take that into precedence. So the presiding officer cannot take a case suo motu, but instead it has to be notified by one of the member. So it can be the member of the Legislative Assembly or it can also be the member of the Parliament, depending on where this particular person has defected from one political party to another. So the first statement is wrong. When we look into the second statement, according to anti-defection law, a petition seeking disqualification has to be decided by the presiding officer within 3 months. This is a wrong statement. Why? Because the law does not prescribe any time limit. This is the major flaw in the anti-defection law. In fact, the Supreme Court has made a recommendation to the legislatures, to the parliament, that you come up with a law prescribing 3 months, but such a law has not been passed by the parliament. So do not, as of now, there is no parameter, there is no time period before which this speaker or the presiding officer will have to decide on it. Recently, there was also a petition that was filed in the Supreme Court as well. The petitioner was asking the Supreme Court to come up with certain guidelines as well, but the Supreme Court has declined and has said that the court does not have the power to legislate. It is the prerogative of the House, it is the prerogative of the Parliament. They have to fix the time limits, and it has declined this particular petition as well. So the court in the previous instances has given the recommendation, but the law does not prescribe any time limit to the presiding officer. Since both the statements are wrong, the answer to this would be none. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which amongst the following crops are the Kharif crops? Rice, cotton, bajra, mustard, and tur. The answer to this is 1, 2, 3, and 5 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the Kharif crops. When we look into the options, what do we have? We have the Kharif crops, which include rice, maize, sorghum, bajra, soybean, and cotton. And when we speak about Rabi crops, it includes wheat, barley, oats, pulses, mustard. Since mustard happens to be a Rabi crop and not Kharif crop, the answer to this would be 1, 2, 3, and 5 only. What are the Kharif crops? When we speak about the Kharif crops, these are also called as the monsoon crops. They are domesticated plants cultivated and harvested during the rainy season in South Asia, which lasts between April and October depending on the area. When we speak about Rabi crops, these are the agricultural crops sown in winter and harvested in spring in South Asia. The term is derived from Arabic word for spring, which is used in the Indian subcontinent. How do you remember this? If you are a cricket follower, what you have is RCB. If you are a supporter of RCB or you are a supporter of any other team as well, remember we have RCB, which stands for rice, cotton and bajra, and we also have GT as well, which stands for Gujarat Titans, and Tur stands for tea, and groundnut stands for Gujarat. So remember, when we speak about the Kharif crops, the code that you have to remember is RCB followed by Gujarat Titans, which stands for rice, cotton, bajra, groundnut and tur. Groundnut happens to be predominantly a Kharif crop. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to recent developments regarding recombinant vector vaccines, consider the following statements. Genetic engineering is applied in the development of these vaccines. Bacteria and viruses are used as vectors. Which of the statements given above are correct? The answer to this is both 1 and 2. This happens to be a previous year question from the year 2021. Now let's look into the fact of the day. The fact of the day for today's discussion is Environment Performance Index. What is this Environment Performance Index? This happens to be a biennial index, which means it is published and released every 2 years, and this basically collects the data from multiple countries about the implementational protocols with respect to the environmental performance. So the Environmental Performance Index happens to be a biennial index which was started back in the year 2002, and this happens to be promoted by the World Economic Forum in collaboration with Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy and the Columbia University Center for International Earth Science Information Network. These are very important from the preliminary examination point of view. The 2022 EPI framework basically takes into picture 3 policy objectives, 11 issue categories and 40 indicators. What are these 3 policy objectives? One is in reference to climate, second is in reference to environmental health, and third is in reference to ecosystem vitality. So if we speak about climate, it also has multiple indicators. So what does it mean? We have climate change variations. Let's say for example, what are the parameters, what are the programs, what are the policy initiatives taken by the government to mitigate the CO2 growth rate, the CH4 growth rate, so on and so forth. So that will be considered by the Environment Performance Index. Similarly, when it comes to the environment health, air quality, waste management, water sanitation, heavy metal control, these are some of the indicators that will be taken in terms of environmental health. Third is in terms of ecosystem vitality, where it takes into picture biodiversity and habitat, ecosystem services, fisheries, agriculture, acid rain, water resources, so on and so forth. On the basis of all these parameters, there are rankings given by the Environment Performance Index. So what is the context? India has been ranked last among the 180 countries that have been ranked as per 2022 Environment Performance Index. So which are the top performing countries? We have Denmark, United Kingdom, Finland, Malta and Sweden. The bottom 5 includes Pakistan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Myanmar and India. And India is at 180th ranking. And if you consider the neighbor countries, you have Afghanistan at 81, Sri Lanka at 132, China at 160, Nepal at 162. So India, according to the 2022 ranking, has a very low ranking as per the Environmental Performance Index. So this particular report has taken into picture and has said that good policy results are associated with the wealth in case countries have invested a lot of money in terms of technological improvement with respect to the environment. In case they make sure that the environmental parameters are under control, they have invested a lot of money, and which is why these five countries are at the top. So it is not about wealth generation, but it is also about making use of the country's wealth for the technology upgradation and making sure that they are used for the environmental protection. And at the same time, if you consider some of the developing countries, these countries are aspiring to be industrialized, they want to be urbanized as well, and as a result they are not keeping a check with respect to the pollution, which is why their ranking may not be good, says this particular report. However, if you consider this article, we have the Government of India which has not accepted this index. Why? That is because according to the Government of India, this is based on unfounded assumptions, it is based on surmises and unscientific methods. In fact, the forest and wetlands crucial carbon sinks have not been taken into picture by this particular report, says the Government of India. In fact, the Ministry of Environment also said that the weight of the indicators in which India has performed well was reduced by this index, and the reasons for changing the assignment of the weightage has also not been explained by this ranking. As a result, we have issues with this index, says the Government of India. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.